On a windswept prairie just outside Lolo, Montana, there's a place where the sky stretches endlessly and the storms roll in with breathtaking fury. I invite you now to step into this world where an unsuspecting teenage girl crosses paths with a wild horse in the midst of a life-threatening storm. It's a night that will change both of their destinies. Picture a swirling tempest of rain and thunder, a young heart brimming with courage, and the call of the untamed that can only be answered by the bravest of souls. Get ready to be drawn into a story that will leave you spellbound and breathless. Layla Westcott was 15 years old when her parents announced they were leaving the hustle and bustle of city life behind and moving to a ranch in Lolo, Montana. At the time, she thought it would be the worst decision they had ever made. She had grown up around wide highways, neon-lit shops, and the comforting buzz of the city. To her, the idea of wide-open fields and looming mountain ranges seemed emptier than anything she could imagine. From the back seat of a cramped station wagon loaded with boxes, she gazed at the golden prairies and distant, snow-capped peaks resplendent in the final rays of day. The quiet around her was overwhelming, but there was something about the sky that first evening at the ranch, a sky that seemed bigger than the world itself. Clouds glowed in reds and purples, painting a fiery tapestry over the horizon, and there, on a ridge behind the newly purchased farmhouse, a group of wild horses roamed freely. They were silhouettes against the dying light, their manes and tails whipped by the cool breeze, and Layla felt a tremor of awe ripple through her. Somehow, in the midst of her teenage gloom, that spark of amazement nestled itself into her heart. Her parents had fallen in love with an old ranch near the Bitterroot River Dunrovin Ranch, a real piece of history in the region, and they saw potential in its sprawling acres, though many neighbors considered it dilapidated. The original owners had maintained horses, offered trail rides, and even hosted local youth camps. But in recent years, the ranch fell into disrepair. When Layla's parents, Martin and Chelsea Westcott, stumbled upon the property during a family vacation, they saw not just crumbling stables and overgrown pastures, they saw a future, a place to build anew, a place to find quiet, and, in their words, a place for the family to finally breathe. Layla was the only child. In the eyes of her friends, that meant a life of constant attention and sometimes too much pressure. She often hid away in books or scrolled through her phone, always searching for some window out of her reality. In the beginning, she resented the ranch for taking her away from everything familiar. She spent her nights locked in her tiny new bedroom, eyes glued to her phone, texting her old friends from the city as she tried to cling to the fragments of her former life. But over time, she began to notice small wonders: the chirping of meadowlarks at dawn, the hush of the wind after dusk, the glint of starlight so bright she felt she could trace the cosmos with her fingertips. And, more than anything, the wild horses that roamed beyond the ranch's boundary fence. Sometimes she would see them from her window, a band of mustangs, proud and free, grazing on tall grass in the far fields. They were led by a majestic stallion with a flowing black mane, always standing protectively around the mares and younger horses. Each time Layla caught sight of them, an unspoken ache of admiration filled her. She tried to keep that feeling at bay. After all, she was a city kid. She didn't know anything about horses beyond what she had seen in movies, but there was something about their sheer presence, a magnetism that drew her forward. One late afternoon, after finishing her chores, which included carrying water buckets to the few ranch horses her parents had acquired, she decided to wander a bit further up the slope behind the stables. A sense of curiosity and longing tugged her heart. She climbed the wooden fence separating Dunrovin Ranch from the open range. Shimmering fields stretched on for miles, rolling into the distance where the Bitterroot Mountains formed a rugged silhouette. No one knew she had slipped beyond ranch property, and she was glad for the solitude. The sun was low and cast gilded rays over the grass. Dust motes danced in the light. Her breath sounded too loud in her ears in that immensity of space. Then she spotted him, the black stallion from the wild herd she had admired for weeks. He stood about 100 yards away, nibbling at the tall yellow grass. He seemed bigger up close, broad-chested, and exuding this intangible aura of power. Layla froze. She couldn't believe the raw beauty. His coat gleamed like polished obsidian in the setting sun. She took the tiniest step forward, her heart hammering, fearful of startling him. But something about his posture, the watchful tilt of his ears, told her he already knew she was there. Perhaps he had known the moment she entered the field. She felt a rush of sensations in that moment: excitement, fear, awe, and a fleeting sense of belonging to a world larger than herself. This was no tamed creature, but an echo of the wild frontier. She watched him for a few minutes until she heard a distant thunder, then realized it was the rumble of an approaching summer storm. Over the ridge, dark clouds churned like an angry sea, a sign that she needed to hurry back. The stallion lifted his head, gazing at those clouds, nostrils flaring. He gave a sharp snort and trotted off, vanishing into the deeper swells of land. Layla's heart soared. As summer grew, her parents became busy with renovations. Dunrovin Ranch needed a functional stable, repairs to the house, fencing, and a million other details. Her mother, Chelsea, had grown up with horses in her youth, so she took the lead in caring for the new arrivals. They had purchased 3 mild-tempered equines from a local auction, a paint mare named Dancer, a Palomino gelding named Sundance, and an older bay mare called Rosie. Layla sometimes helped with daily chores, but her fascination lingered on those free-roaming mustangs she saw on the outskirts. She would sneak out to watch them in the evenings, staying perched on the fence rail. The black stallion intrigued her most. She researched everything she could about wild horses, from their herd dynamics to how they found water and what specialized agencies like the Bureau of Land Management did to protect them. She discovered that wild horse populations in certain regions were threatened by lack of resources or forced relocation. Many were rounded up, some adopted, some eventually turned into ranch stock, but some never found a safe home. She read stories about people who rescued mustangs and gentled them. Something about that notion took hold in her heart. Days turned to weeks, and the ranch blossomed under the renewed care of the Westcott family. Local ranch hands praised Martin's dedication and Chelsea's skill in handling the daily horse tasks. They hired a couple of stable hands, fixed fences, and set about preparing a barn that had once been used for community events. Every so often, Layla would observe her parents sharing proud glances as they walked side by side across the yard, marveling at the place they were molding for themselves and for their daughter. Still, her parents worried about Layla's hesitation to join in or make new friends in Lolo. They encouraged her to enroll in 4-H, or the local riding club for youths. Each time, Layla shrank back, feeling too shy and too different. She was a city kid with no real knowledge of ranch life, and the local teens felt as distant as the moon. She continued her nighttime habit of reading in bed, phone in hand, occasionally texting her friends back in her old city. But the responses were fewer. They were moving on. She couldn't blame them. She was trapped in that limbo, old life gone, new life not quite comfortable. Then the storm came, the one that would change her life forever. It was mid-September. The air had a subtle chill, and the leaves along the nearby creek were starting to hint at golden and red. A fierce front of dark, swirling clouds gathered over the mountains. The weather report predicted strong winds, torrential rain, and thunder so loud it might rattle windows. Locals said such storms were uncommon this early in autumn, but not unheard of. That evening, Martin and Chelsea rushed to secure the barns, double-check the fences, and ensure that Rosie, Dancer, and Sundance were safely sheltered in their stalls. Layla hovered near the stable entrance, feeling the electricity of the air prickle against her skin. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the horizon like a momentary, haunting midday. Thunder soon followed, a deep roar that seemed to come from beneath the earth. The wind whipped across the ranch, bending the grass nearly flat. Rain came in fat droplets at first, tapping out an eerie rhythm on the stable roof. Then, in a sudden fury, it pelted down in sheets that made the entire landscape vanish behind a shimmering curtain of water. The stable hands rushed home, and Martin led Chelsea and Layla back toward the ranch house. Suddenly, a jagged bolt of lightning split the sky in the distance. For the briefest second, Layla thought she saw a dark silhouette rear up a horse shape on the ridge. Her heart kicked at her ribs. The wild horses, where would they find shelter in this deluge? Her mother called after her, voice nearly drowned by the howling wind. "Layla, come inside." But Layla's eyes locked on that ridge. If the Mustangs were caught in the heart of the storm, they would seek cover under trees or in some hollow. They had survived countless storms. Surely they were safe. And yet, something in the depths of her chest urged her forward. She remembered the black stallion, how regal he stood, how his eyes glowed with an ember of quiet intelligence. If they were in trouble. But what help could she be? The safe choice was to hurry indoors. Chelsea yanked her arm, guiding her, but as they rounded the corner of the stable, Layla wrenched free. Martin was about to scold her, or at least demand she return, when another flash lit up the sky. Through the sheets of rain, a horse's cry resonated, shrill and frantic. The sound was like a razor on Layla's nerves. It tore through the wind and hammered into her heart. She had never heard such a raw, anguished cry from an animal. "What was that?" Martin shouted, hands shielding his eyes from the driving rain. Layla's thoughts swirled. Could a wild horse be in danger? Instinct warred with fear. She didn't even realize she had started running until she heard her father shouting her name. The roar of the storm swallowed their voices. She sprinted, stumbling across muddy ground as rain pooled around her ankles. The wind seemed to push her back, but she forced her way forward, forging a path toward the ridge. Halfway there, lightning flared again, bright as a camera flash. She glimpsed a horse, not black but a dark bay, thrashing on the ground near the fence line. It seemed trapped, or hurt, or pinned, she couldn't tell. Her heart thundered in her ears. In that fleeting blink of brightness, she made out twisted barbed wire around the horse's hind legs. When the lightning faded and the night roared back, it was like the entire world was drenched in chaos. But she knew what she had seen. She pressed forward, shoes squelching in the rain and mud. It felt like an eternity before she reached the horse's side. It was a young mare by the look of her lean frame, her dark mane plastered to her neck with water. Her brown eyes flashed terror as she kicked in vain, trying to free herself from the wire. Blood streaked her hind legs. Each time she struggled, the barbs bit deeper. The sight turned Layla's stomach, but she pressed her lips together and inched closer, arms outstretched, voice trembling. She tried to speak softly, though the storm's roar made it nearly impossible. "It's okay," she murmured. "I'm here to help. Just hold still." The mare's eyes rolled in panic, but some part of her stilled at Layla's presence, perhaps sensing the calm in her voice or the earnestness in her posture. Rain drenched them both. Thunder shook the sky again, and the horse tried to rear up, shrieking in fear. Layla's heart hammered, but she held her ground, praying the mare wouldn't strike her by accident. Slowly she moved in, reaching for the twisted wire. Her fingers fumbled as lightning flickered overhead, her damp hair whipping her face. She could hardly see, and she had no wire cutters. She looked around frantically. A heavy piece of wood from the broken fence lay nearby. Maybe she could pry the wire open. She grabbed it, tried to wedge it between the wires, and push them apart. The barbs scraped her arm, leaving a burning line of pain, but she kept going. The mare whinnied, flailing, her hooves thrashing dangerously close to Layla's face. Gasping, Layla pulled back. She had to calm the horse or risk being seriously injured. The roar of the wind was deafening, but she lifted her voice as best she could. "Shh, hey, I'm not leaving. I'm still here." Her tone came out trembling but gentle. She repeated this over and over, like a mantra. Between the monstrous peals of thunder, she swore she could hear the horse breathing raggedly. After a moment, the mare's struggles began to subside, as though some primal trust or exhaustion was guiding her not to fight Layla's efforts. Taking advantage of the lull, Layla forced herself to keep going. She pressed the wood against the wire, straining every muscle to pry the twisted sections open just enough. The horse's legs slipped free with a sickening tear of flesh against barb. Crimson stained the muddy water. Layla stepped back, and the mare tried to rise, hooves sliding in the mud. She half fell, but got her front legs under her. Then the hind legs followed. For a terrifying second, it seemed she might lunge away, barreling over the girl. Instead, the mare stumbled a few steps, nearly collapsing, but remained standing on quivering limbs. Blood trickled from the wounds. Layla feared they were worse than they looked in the darkness. The poor horse needed medical attention. At that moment, a beam of light cut through the sheets of rain. Layla turned to see her father and mother approaching, flashlights in hand, trudging up the slope. Their shouts were lost on the wind, but she saw relief and fear etched into their faces. Her father reached her first, out of breath, eyes wide with concern. "Layla, are you crazy?" He yelled over the gale, though his tone carried more panic than anger. Then he saw the injured mare trembling nearby. Chelsea, who had far more experience with horses, immediately recognized the gravity of the situation. She passed the flashlight to Martin and carefully moved toward the mare, her voice low and soothing. "Easy, girl," she cooed, inching closer in a diagonal approach to avoid seeming threatening. Layla watched with admiration. Even in this chaos, her mother's calm presence radiated comfort. The mare's ears flicked. She snorted, but allowed Chelsea to approach without bolting. Chelsea turned to the others. "We can't leave her out here," she said, water streaming down her face. "She'll bleed to death or go into shock. We need to get her somewhere dry, get those wounds cleaned." Martin, his jacket plastered to his body, nodded, shining the flashlight over the mare's back and hind legs. He grimaced at the sight of blood mixing with the storm runoff. "Let's try to get her to the barn," he said, but the nearest barn was a good distance away. The ground was slick, the storm still raging. They hatched a desperate plan, coaxed the mare to walk slowly alongside them, one step at a time. If she could just make it to the stable, they could attempt some basic medical treatment. Layla volunteered to help lead the horse. Her mother gave her an appraising, worried look, but then nodded. "Move carefully, talk to her constantly," Chelsea instructed. She looped a length of rope, meant for fence repairs, lightly around the horse's neck to guide her. The mare pinned her ears back initially, but did not bolt. Step by excruciating step, they navigated the muddy slope back toward the ranch structures. Lightning flashed often enough to illuminate the path. The wind hammered them, and the rain stung, but they pressed on. Layla's legs burned, and her arms and back ached from tension. But she refused to give up. Each time thunder cracked overhead, the mare startled, but Chelsea and Layla murmured softly, weaving words of reassurance through the night's tumult. Martin led the way with the flashlight, scanning for hazards. At last, they reached the barn. Its wide doors were rattling against the wind. Once inside, the sudden relief from the storm's noise and fury was almost disorienting. The patter of rain on the roof still sounded like 1,000 drumbeats, but it was softer compared to the raging outside. Martin latched the doors, sealing them from the worst of the wind, while Chelsea and Layla guided the mare into an open stall. Rosie, Dancer and Sundance were in adjacent stalls, restless and frightened by the raging weather. Upon seeing the injured newcomer, they whinnied, as though in sympathy or alarm. Chelsea shone a light on the wounds. It was worse than Layla had hoped. The mare's flanks were littered with cuts and bruises, and her right hind leg had a particularly deep gash. Blood seeped steadily from it, painting her dark coat with a deeper black hue in the flickering light. Her breathing was shallow, her eyes hazy. Shock was setting in. Martin brought over the first aid kit they kept for the ranch horse's gauze, antiseptic wash, bandages, all the basics. Chelsea knelt by the mare, passing a bottle of antiseptic to Layla. "We need to clean the wound, but carefully," she said, her voice low, urgent. "Layla, keep her calm while I do this." Layla hesitated. She had never done anything like this before. Yet, the fear in her chest felt overshadowed by an inexplicable drive to help the injured animal. Kneeling near the mare's head, she placed a trembling hand on the slick, quivering neck. "You're okay," she whispered, though her heart thrummed in her throat. "We're going to help you. Just hold on." The mare huffed, letting out a shuddering breath. Her large brown eye flicked to Layla's face, weary and dark. Chelsea used warm water and antiseptic to flush out the cut. The mare flinched, stomping her uninjured hind leg. Layla crooned, "Easy," again and again, stroking her mane. She could feel the mare's pulse thrumming under her hand, matching the frantic rush of her own blood. Finally, with Martin's help, Chelsea wrapped the wound in gauze and bandages. The immediate bleeding slowed, though the mare was not out of danger. Infection, shock, or deeper injuries could still pose a life-threatening risk. As the hours passed that night, the storm continued pounding. Martin ventured to the house and returned with old blankets to lay over the mare for warmth. They dried her as best they could and offered water, though she seemed too exhausted to drink. Despite Layla's stinging arms, the barbed wire had left scratches and her drenched clothes. She refused to leave the mare's side. Something powerful and unspoken formed between them, a thread of trust forged in crisis. Near midnight, the storm at last began to relent, the downpour reducing to a steady rain, and the violent gusts of wind easing into moans. The family and the injured mare endured together in that stable, the sounds of shifting horses, drip of water, and occasional snort or stomp echoing around them. Chelsea insisted on continuing to monitor the mare's vital signs, checking her pulse and respiration. She taught Layla how to feel for a racing heartbeat against the horse's chest, guiding her daughter's hand gently. Though each minute felt like an hour, dawn finally arrived in a pale wash of light across the eastern horizon. By that first break of day, the mare's condition had stabilized. She lifted her head and took a few tentative sips of water, though she still favored her wounded leg. Chelsea, bleary-eyed from lack of sleep, managed a weak smile of relief. Martin, exhausted but determined, had already started rummaging for his phone to call a local veterinarian. Layla felt a damp chill clinging to her bones. She had spent much of the night huddled in the straw, leaning against the mare's side in an attempt to give warmth and reassurance. Now that the immediate crisis had passed, her body ached all over and adrenaline drained from her limbs, leaving trembling fatigue in its place. But in her heart, she felt a bright ember, a sense of purpose, a sense of having done something good and important. The local vet, Dr. Kelsey Wright, arrived mid-morning. She was a middle-aged woman with an air of brisk competence and a kind smile. After examining the mare, she nodded at Chelsea. "She's lucky. Could have been a lot worse," Dr. Wright said. "The leg wound is serious, but with regular cleaning, proper antibiotics, and rest, she might make a good recovery. The question is whether she can remain calm and not re-injure herself if she spooks." That was the delicate part. The mare was wild. None of them knew how she would behave once she regained her strength. Mustangs often carried a fierce independence, distrustful of human contact. Layla felt a twist in her stomach. She could see the fear in the mare's eyes whenever anyone but Layla or Chelsea approached. Yet, she also sensed that a fragile bridge had been built in the chaos of the storm. Perhaps the mare understood on some level that Layla had saved her life. Over the next few days, they cared for her around the clock. Dr. Wright administered a round of antibiotics, and the Westcotts made sure the mare's stall was kept clean, with fresh bedding to protect the leg. The mare allowed Layla to approach and touch her, though she still shied away from sudden movements or loud noises. Chelsea, impressed with how quickly Layla had taken to the caretaker role, urged her daughter to continue building trust. "Just be present, talk to her, let her know she's safe," she advised. And so Layla did. She spent hours in the stall, reading aloud from her phone or from a well-worn novel. Sometimes she would simply sit, letting the mare grow used to her presence. Her father teased that she was becoming a real horse whisperer, but there was admiration in his voice. The name Stormy came to Layla in a flash of inspiration. Fitting, she thought, for a horse rescued in the fury of a storm. Soon, the entire family started referring to the mare that way, even Dr. Wright, who smiled when she heard it. "Stormy it is," the vet said with approval. Over the next few weeks, Stormy's leg began to heal. It remained wrapped, and Dr. Wright visited several times to monitor her progress, removing stitches and applying fresh bandages until the skin knitted. Stormy allowed the care, albeit cautiously, as long as Layla or Chelsea was near. The spirit in her eyes returned. She began to nibble at the hay in the stable. She whinnied when Layla approached, even pressing her soft muzzle against the girl's shoulder in an unspoken gesture of trust. Layla felt her own world changing in parallel with Stormy's recovery. She realized that she no longer dreaded the open fields or the quiet nights of the ranch. She relished her daily routine of grooming, cleaning the stalls, and walking Stormy around the yard for gentle exercise once the mare was strong enough. Each step they took under the wide Montana sky felt like a victory for Stormy's battered body and for Layla's uncertain soul. In her old life, she had felt overshadowed, struggling to find meaning or passion. Here, she discovered a calling that energized her heart. One chilly afternoon, near the end of October, Layla took Stormy out to graze in a paddock behind the barn. The mare had grown strong enough to limp only slightly on her once shredded leg. Fresh grass was sparse, but she found enough to nibble. The sun was low, casting long shadows. A gentle breeze fluttered the autumn leaves. Layla watched Stormy's ears perk at some sound across the fields. Instinctively, Stormy raised her head and stared over the fence line, eyes fixed on the horizon. Layla followed her gaze and saw a band of wild horses in the distance. Among them was the black stallion, tossing his mane in the waning sunlight. Stormy's body tensed. She let out a soft whinny in greeting or longing. The band whinnied back, the sound drifting on the wind. Layla felt an ache in her chest as she watched Stormy paw at the ground, unsettled. Of course, Stormy wanted to return to her herd. She was a free Mustang at heart. Layla's throat tightened. She had come to love Stormy, but she knew deep down that holding a free creature captive just to satisfy her own attachment was not right. That night, she talked to her mother, explaining her worries and hopes for Stormy. She voiced her greatest fear. Letting Stormy go meant never seeing her again, but to keep her penned might break the mare's spirit. Chelsea listened quietly, then stroked her daughter's hair. "Sometimes loving means letting go, Layla," she said gently, "but we should also consider that Stormy may not be able to survive in the wild right now. Her leg is better, but she's still recovering. The herd might reject her, or she might struggle to keep up." Layla nodded. Tears stung her eyes. She felt torn. Stormy had saved her, in a way, by giving her a sense of purpose. But the bond they had formed was delicate. She wanted to do right by Stormy, though she wasn't sure how. Over the following weeks, Layla conferred with Dr. Wright, who believed Stormy could make a full recovery physically. The deeper question was whether the herd would accept her again. Mustangs could be fiercely loyal to their group, but a horse that had spent weeks among humans, healing from injuries, might face challenges reintegrating. Still, Dr. Wright said, if she finds them again and can keep up, nature often finds a way. Word spread around Lolo of the teenager who had rescued a wild Mustang. Locals, impressed by her courage and dedication, offered support, even donating feed and medical supplies to help. A few cautioned that the horse might never be truly tame. Mustangs were known for their stubborn independence. But Layla wasn't trying to break Stormy's spirit. She only wanted Stormy to have a future, whether that was with humans or back in the wild. Eventually, the day came when Stormy's wound had fully closed. Her limp was slight. The Westcotts opened the corral gate, letting Stormy take a few hesitant steps out onto the open field, with Layla at her side. The air was brisk, and the ground was dusted with the first flurries of winter snow. Stormy lifted her head, nostrils flaring, testing the wind. Somewhere out there, her herd roamed. With a lump in her throat, Layla unclipped the makeshift rope halter from around Stormy's neck. She had grown used to leading Stormy, guiding her on short walks, but now she let the rope fall away. Stormy was free. The mare stood there for a moment, as if uncertain. Then, with a grateful soft nicker, she nudged Layla's outstretched hands. Their eyes met one last, silent exchange of thanks. Stormy broke into a measured trot, heading toward the ridge, and Layla watched with her parents at a distance. She wanted to call out, to run after her, but she knew this was how it had to be. Stormy crested the slope, her figure backlit by a pale sky. She paused there and looked back, her dark mane lifting in the breeze. In Layla's mind, she imagined Stormy saying goodbye. And then Stormy was gone, her hoofbeats fading beyond the ridge. Layla stood with tears slipping down her cheeks, her parents each placing a hand on her shoulders. A sense of loss warred with pride in her chest. "You did the right thing," Martin murmured, giving her a gentle squeeze. Chelsea nodded, eyes glistening. "She'll remember you," she said softly. The weeks that followed were bittersweet. Layla carried on with ranch chores, her heart heavy but resolute. She found a new sense of belonging in daily life at Dunrovin Ranch. She discovered that she enjoyed working with the tamer horses, even taking riding lessons from her mother. She made a few friends at school, people who had heard the story of Stormy, or who admired her tenacity for galloping her horse across the stubble fields. Her life began to bloom in ways she never expected when she first arrived. By December, winter had fully set in, draping the ranch in white. The rolling hills glistened each morning in the sun's early rays. The family's footsteps crunched over snow as they did barn chores. Days were short, nights long, and the wild horse herd had moved to lower elevations or wooded areas to graze on scrub and bark. Rarely did Layla catch even a glimpse of the black stallion or his band. There was no sign of Stormy. A pang of worry often seized her. Was Stormy okay? Had she been accepted back into the herd, or was she wandering alone, injured? Sometimes she woke in the night, dreaming of Stormy's frantic calls in the storm, only to find herself curled in bed. Her parents told her again and again that Mustangs were survivors, well adapted to the harsh winters of Montana. Layla tried to trust that Stormy's fate lay in the balance of the natural world. Then, one late winter afternoon, just after a light snowfall, she caught sight of movement at the far side of the ranch. She grabbed her coat and boots, stepping out into the chill. By the fence, she saw several dark shapes, horses. Her heart hammered. She whistled softly, just once. The shape startled slightly, but didn't bolt. She advanced carefully. She recognized the black stallion first, the leader of the wild herd, big and imposing. His dark eyes flicked to her. Behind him stood a group of mares with shaggy winter coats. A smaller figure stepped forward, tentatively. It was Stormy, the breath caught in Layla's throat. She was alive. She looked strong, her coat thick against the cold, her leg obviously healed. Her eyes glimmered in the slanting light, and she let out a low nicker. Layla felt tears well up, warming her cheeks despite the cold air. She lifted a hand, palm out, calling softly to Stormy. The mare eyed her, ears forward, and then took a bold step closer. The stallion tossed his head as if to warn Stormy, but Stormy moved forward anyway, bridging the distance to the fence line. She lowered her head near Layla's hand, exhaling warm breath that billowed in the frosty air. For a moment, horse and girl stood in silent communion. No rope, no stable walls, no forced captivity, just a bond that transcended it all. The black stallion let out a snort, stamping a hoof, and Stormy turned to rejoin her herd. But before she did, she nudged Layla's outstretched hand one last time. Then she trotted away, healthy and free. Layla's heart soared. She watched the mustangs canter off into the snowy horizon, the wind kicking up sparkling flurries around them. She pressed her lips together, overcome. It was a vision of wild beauty, a testament to survival. And in that moment, everything the ranch, her new life, her uncertain future felt right. She didn't speak. She couldn't. Tears of joy streaked her face, and she leaned on the fence for support, filled with a swelling sense of awe. When at last she found her voice, she whispered, "Thank you," though she wasn't sure if she was thanking Stormy, or the world, or fate, or all of them at once. No one else witnessed that reunion. She told her parents later, trying to describe the grace and the fierce vitality of the moment. Chelsea smiled knowingly, her own eyes misty. Martin embraced his daughter, quietly marveling at how she had come into her own. Layla might have arrived at this ranch feeling uprooted and lost, but Stormy's rescue had awakened a new purpose in her. She learned lessons of resilience, empathy, and the deep connection that can exist between humans and the natural world. She had tested her own courage and discovered a reservoir of strength she never knew she had. As winter slowly gave way to spring, Layla continued to grow in confidence, taking a more active role in the ranch's endeavors. She helped with horse care, assisted with the local children's riding lessons, and even started writing short stories about her time with Stormy. She found that by sharing her experiences, she could capture glimpses of that awe and pass it on to others. The ranch thrived, her parents beaming with pride as they watched their daughter blossom. Though she didn't always see Stormy, she felt the mare's presence in everything she did. Sometimes, at dusk, she would look out to the horizon, hoping for the sight of the wild herd galloping across the ridge. Other times, she would simply close her eyes and remember the feel of Stormy's muzzle in her palm, the unspoken trust that bridged two different worlds in a moment of crisis. Summer came again, and with it, the swirl of new adventures. Layla enrolled in the local 4-H equestrian club, made friends who shared her passion, and even competed in a small riding event for novices. She placed third, which was more than enough to make her beam with pride. Her parents clapped and hollered from the sidelines, their city-born daughter now thoroughly at home in Montana. Eventually, news of Stormy's rescue reached beyond Lolo. A local newspaper wrote a short feature on the teenage heroine and her wild Mustang, praising Layla for her courage in that storm and for the compassion she showed in nursing the mare back to health. Layla felt shy about the attention, but somewhere deep down it fueled her desire to keep forging a path that honored the spirit of Stormy's freedom. She toyed with the idea of studying equine science or veterinary medicine someday. Maybe she could help more horses, or even work with mustangs in adoption programs. No matter what she chose, she knew the storm and that desperate rescue would forever remain a turning point in her life. On the anniversary of that fateful night, storms rolled in again. The wind whipped through the ranch, the sky flickering with lightning. It was as though nature was remembering. Layla stood in the barn, ensuring all the ranch horses were safe. Her chest tightened at the memory of that frantic, rain-soaked chase, the wire, the blood, and Stormy's trembling body in the mud. She recalled the desperation, the fear that nearly paralyzed her, and how she had pushed through it. When the wind howled around the barn walls, she felt a ripple of awe. She realized she was no longer afraid. Storms would come and go, but she was ready to face them, come what may. That night, as the rain poured, she peeked out a window. Thunder rattled the glass. She wondered if Stormy was out there somewhere, huddled with her herd, forging her own path through the chaos of nature. Instead of dread, she felt only gratitude. They had both survived. They had both found their footing. The storm might rage, but it could never erase what they had shared. Sometimes the quiet moments hold the most profound revelations. Standing by that window, Layla felt an overwhelming sense of acceptance. She accepted herself no longer simply the reluctant city girl, uprooted against her will, but a young woman who had braved a storm to save a life. She had proven that love and courage could transform not just a horse's fate, but her own. She closed her eyes, listening to the rainfall, letting it lull her into a sense of calm. And so it was that the teenage girl and the wild Mustang parted ways in body, but remained forever linked in spirit. Stormy's life continued among the free herd, roaming Montana's vast landscapes, weaving a story of survival and unwavering independence. Layla's life thrived at the ranch, forging new friendships, chasing new dreams, her spirit anchored in lessons learned through hardship and compassion. If she closed her eyes, she could hear the echo of that wild whinny in the storm, a call from the heart of nature that found an answer in her own. They had rescued each other in ways words could barely express. So when the wind surges across the plains at dusk, carrying the scent of distant rains, Layla sometimes steps outside. She listens to the hush of the fields, the rustle of the grass. She waits for the thunder's distant roll. And she remembers the night she dared to meet the storm halfway, forging a bond that transcended every boundary. In that memory, she finds her strength, her purpose, and an unbreakable spark of hope. Because sometimes the wild must be set free, and in letting go, we truly learn what it means to hold on. Thank you for journeying with me through this powerful story of a teenage girl braving the fiercest storm to rescue a wounded wild horse. Their unspoken bond, forged in thunder and lightning, reminds us that true courage often blooms when we're pushed to our limits, and that love is so much stronger than fear. If this tale of resilience, connection, and personal growth moved you, please show your support. Remember to like this video, share it with friends who appreciate a heartfelt story, and subscribe to the channel for more narratives that celebrate the unbreakable bonds between humans and nature. Your support ensures more inspiring stories can reach those who need them. Thank you again for being a part of this journey. May the spirit of the wild and the promise of hope guide you wherever your own path may lead.